Hello and welcome back to Rabbit Reads, where we are on Chapter 4 of Skulduggery Pleasant Playing with Fire, in which this chapter is entitled The Beauty, the Beast. They left the sanctuary and drove across town until they came to a street lined with ugly tenement buildings. Skulduggery parked the Bentley, wrapped his scarf around his jaw, and pulled his hat down low and got out. "I noticed you haven't mentioned how I was thrown off a tower tonight," Valkyrie said as they crossed the road. "Does it need mentioning?" Skulduggery queried. "Scapegrace threw me off a tower. If that doesn't require mentioning, then what does?" "I knew you could handle it." "It was a tower." Valkyrie led the way into one of the tenement buildings. "You've been thrown off a higher," Skulduggery said. "Yes, but you were always there to catch me." "So you've learned a valuable lesson. There will be times when I'm not there to catch you." "See, that sounds to me like a lesson I could have been told." "Nonsense. This way you'll never forget." Skulduggery removed his disguise as they climbed the stairs. Just as they reached the second floor, Valkyrie stopped and turned to him. "Was it a test?" she asked. "I mean, I know I'm still new at this. I'm still the rookie. Did you hang back to test me, to see if I'd be able to handle it alone?" "Well, kind of," he said. "Actually, no, nothing like that. My shoelace was untied. That's why I was late. That's why you were alone." "I could have been killed because you were tying your shoelace." "A untied shoelace can be dangerous," Skulduggery said. "I could have tripped." She stared at him. A moment dragged by. "I'm joking," he said at last. She relaxed. "Really?" "Absolutely. I would never have tripped. I'm far too graceful." He moved past her, and she glowered, then followed him into the third room. They walked to the middle door, and a slight man with large round spectacles and a bow tie opened it and let them in. The library was a vast labyrinth of tall bookcases, one that Valkyrie had managed to get herself lost in no fewer than 11 times. It seemed to amuse Skulduggery no end whenever she found herself at a dead end. Or even better, back where she had started. So she let him lead the way. China Sorrows passed in front of them, wearing a dark trouser suit with her black hair tied off her face. She stopped and smiled when she saw them. The most exquisitely beautiful woman Valkyrie had ever seen. China had a habit of making people fall in love with her at first glance. "Skulduggery," she said. "Valkyrie, so good to see you both. What brings the sanctuary's esteemed investigators back to my door? I'm assuming it is sanctuary business?" "You assume correctly," Skulduggery said. "And I'm sure you already know why we're here." Her smile turned coy. "Let me think. A certain recently liberated baron. You want to know if I've heard any particular juicy rumors?" "Have you?" Valkyrie asked. China hesitated, looked around, and gave them another smile. "Let us talk privately," she said, leading them out of the library and across the hall into her luxurious apartment. Once Skulduggery had closed the door, she took a seat. "Tell me, Valkyrie," she said, "how much do you know about Baron Vengius?" Valkyrie sat on the couch, but Skulduggery remained standing. "Not a whole lot," she said. "He's dangerous, I know that much." "Oh, yes," China agreed, her blue eyes twinkling in the lamplight. "Very dangerous. He is a fanatical follower of the Faceless Ones, and there is nothing more dangerous than a zealot. Along with Nefarian Serpine and Lord Vile,
Vengius was one of Malevolent's most trusted generals. He was assigned to their most secret operations. Have you ever heard of the Grotesquerie, my dear?
Valkyrie shook her head.
Before he was caught, Baron Vengius was given the task of resurrecting a faceless one from the remains found in a long-forgotten tomb.
Valkyrie frowned.
Is that even possible? Bringing one of them back to life after all this time?
It was Skulduggery who answered her. Bringing a faceless one back whole proved to be beyond his abilities. So Vengius combined the remains with parts and organs from other creatures, forming a hybrid, what we call grotesquerie. But even then, an ingredient was missing. China took over.
2, actually. First, he needed a necromancer's power to revive it, and then once it was alive, he needed something to keep it that way. When Lord Vile died, Vengius thought he could harness Vile's power. Vile was a necromancer, a practitioner of death magic, shadow magic. It is in the necromancer way to place most of their power in an object or a weapon, or in this case, his armor. So, if Vengius wore that armor,
Valkyrie said,
he'd have all Vile's power?
But he couldn't find the armor, Skulduggery said. Lord Vile died alone, and his armor was lost.
What about the other missing ingredient? Did he find out what that was?
China answered.
From what I've heard, yes, he did. So what is it? He knows. We don't. Fortunately for us, and the world at large, Skulduggery was around to foil this plot before Vengius could find the armor and retrieve this mysterious missing ingredient. He tracked the Baron to a known enemy hideaway and brought him to justice, in what became one of the most talked about battles of the entire war. Skulduggery was badly injured in that fight, if I remember correctly.
Valkyrie looked at Skulduggery, and he folded his arms. This is a history lesson, he said. Why are we going over this?
Because,
China said with a smile,
I have heard that this final missing ingredient, whatever it is, has at last been recovered, or at least located by the Baron's associates.
Skulduggery's head tilted. Who are these associates?
I'm afraid not even I know that. So, if Vengius now has the missing ingredient,
Valkyrie said uneasily,
can he revive the grow thing? Grotesquerie,
China corrected. And no, Skulduggery said. It's impossible. He'd need Vile's armor, which he doesn't have.
But if he did, and he revived this thing, what would it do? But if he did, and he revived this thing, what would it do? Would we be able to stop it?
Skulduggery hesitated for a split second. The threat the Grotesquerie would pose is a little bigger than that. Theoretically, it would be able to summon the Faceless Ones back to this world by opening a portal through realities.
A portal?
Valkyrie said, a little doubtful. Yes, but the Grotesquerie would have to be at full strength to do it, and that's not going to happen.
Why not?
A heart had to be provided for it, but the only one suitable was the heart of a true Gilach.
I'm sorry.
Kuna Giole Dubie.
Kuna Gile Dubie,
China said.
To give it its full Irish title, they do still teach you Gaelic in school, yes? Yes. It means it's Black Hound of something, right? Almost. Hound of the Black Moon. Terrible creatures. They're virtually extinct now, but they were ruthless, savage things.
Ruthless, savage things, Skulduggery said. They were only ruthlessly savage for one night every few years at a lunar eclipse. So no matter how much power Vengius pumps into that thing, the grotesquerie will not be strong enough to open a portal until the Earth, Moon, and Sun line up, which won't be for another
2 nights,
China said. Skulduggery sagged and his head dropped. Well, that's just dandy, he muttered. Later on the motorway back to Haggard, Valkyrie turned to Skulduggery.
So,
she said.
A legendary battle, eh?
Skulduggery turned his head to her. I'm sorry?
The battle between you and Vengius, the legendary one. What happened?
We had a fight.
But why is it one of the most talked about battles of the war?
I don't know, he said. Maybe people had nothing else to talk about.
China said you were badly injured. Is that why you don't like him? Because you were injured?
I don't like him because he's evil.
So it's got nothing to do with him injuring you.
It's because he's evil, Skulduggery said grumpily. They stayed on the motorway for another 5 minutes, then took the slip road. The roads became narrow and curved between darkened fields and lone houses, and then orange streetlights appeared on either side, and they were driving into Haggard. They reached the pier, and the Bentley stopped.
Tomorrow's going to be a big day.
Skulduggery shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. If we can keep Vengius out of the country, we've got nothing to worry about.
And if we can't?
Then we have a whole lot to worry about. And I'm going to need you rested and alert.
Sir, yes, sir,
she said, raising a mocking brow. She opened the door and got out, and moments later the Bentley's taillights disappeared into the darkness. Valkyrie stood beside the pier for a moment, watching the dark sea churn at the rocks and play with the small boats moored nearby. She liked watching the sea. Its power made her feel safe. Back when Valkyrie Kane's name had been Stephanie Edgley, she didn't know much about life outside of Haggard. It was a small town, tucked into the east coast of Ireland, and things there were always so quiet and peaceful, and so dull. That all changed when Nefarian Serpine murdered her uncle. Gordon was a best-selling novelist, a writer of horror and fantasy, but he was also a man who knew the big secret. He knew about the subculture of sorcerers and mages, about the quiet little wars that had fought. He knew about the faceless ones, the terrible dark gods exiled from this world, and the people who wanted them to return. In the days that followed, she had met the skeleton detective and learned that she had a bloodline that could be traced back to the world's first sorcerers, the Ancients. She was also faced with taking a new name. Everyone Skulduggery had told her has 3 names: the name they are born with, the name they are given, and the name they take. The name they are born with, their true name, lies buried deep in their subconscious. The name they are given, usually by their parents, is the only name most people will ever know. This is the name that can be used against them, so sorcerers must take a 3rd name to protect themselves. And so Stephanie Edgley became Valkyrie Kane, and she started on the road to become an elemental. She started to learn magic. Valkyrie sneaked behind her house, stood directly beneath her window, and concentrated. Until a few weeks ago, she had needed a ladder to climb up to her room, but every lesson with Skulduggery gave her more control over her powers. She took her time, felt the calmness flow through her. She flexed her fingers, feeling the air touch her skin, feeling the fault lines between the spaces. She felt how they connected and recognized how each would affect the other once the right amount of pressure was applied. She splayed her hands beneath her, and the air rippled, and she shot upwards, just managing to grab the windowsill. She still missed it occasionally, but she was getting better. She opened the window and grunting with exertion, pulled herself through. Moving as quietly as she could, she closed the window behind her and turned on the light. She ignored the girl who sat up in her bed, the girl who was an exact replica of herself. She went to the door, put her ear to it, and listened. Satisfied that her parents were sound asleep, Valkyrie shrugged off her coat as her replica stood up. "Your arm," it said. "It's bruised." "Had a little run-in with a bad guy," Valkyrie answered, keeping her voice low. "How was your day?" "School was okay. I did all the homework, except the last maths questions. I didn't know how to do that. Your mom made lasagna for dinner." Valkyrie kicked off her boots. "Nothing strange happened?" "No, a very normal day." "Good. Are you ready to resume your life?" "I am." The reflection nodded, went to the full-length mirror, and stepped through, then turned and waited. Valkyrie touched the glass, and a day's worth of memory flooded into her mind as the reflection changed. The clothes Valkyrie was wearing appeared on it, and then it was nothing more than a reflected image in a mirror. She sifted through the new memories, arranging them beside the memories she formed on her own. There had been a careers class in school. The teacher had tried to get them to declare what they wanted to be when they left school, or at least what they'd like to study in college. Nobody had any idea, of course. The reflection had stayed quiet, too. Valkyrie thought about this. She didn't really need a regular career, after all. She was set to inherit Gordon's estate and all of his royalties when she turned 18, anyway. So she'd never be short of money. Besides, what kind of career would interest her outside of magic? If she'd been in that class, she knew that what she would have answered. Detective. That would have garnered a few sniggers around the room, but she wouldn't have minded. The main difference between her and her friends was not the magic, she knew, and nor was it the adventure. It was the fact that she knew what she wanted to do with her life, and she was already doing it. Valkyrie undressed, pulled on her Dublin football jersey, and climbed into bed. 20 seconds later, she was asleep. And so that closes Chapter 4 of Skulduggery Pleasant Playing with Fire. So, the reflection, if you're watching this video and you haven't seen the videos for the first book, the reflection is something Skulduggery did so that Valkyrie or Stephanie could go with him to help him with his investigations. And as it said, each time she touches the mirror, it gives her the memories that the reflection got throughout that day. It's getting a bit slow. I'm going to be honest. It's getting a bit slow with the storytelling, because all we know so far is that they have some sort of monster called the Grotesquerie, if I'm even pronouncing that right. And it misses 2 ingredients that can make it whole, which proves to be kind of a good thing for the detective and his partner, because if they don't have those 2 ingredients, then no monster. But until then, thank you guys so much for listening to this one. If you liked it, you know what to do. Keep things crazy, and I'll see you guys in the next one.